for the last few weeks, the last 5 weeks, we have been going through talking about gaming misconceptions, gaming UX misconceptions, and we've been using this book by Celia Hodent, The Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent, as a textbook to help us study and learn. So today we are going to be talking about the misconception number 5, that there's not enough time or money to consider UX. And also, real quick on a housekeeping, I'm trying a new microphone here, so give me feedback. Let me know, how is the sound? Is it better? Is it worse? I am trying to make the sound better for you. I have sensitive hearing, so everything's loud to me, but then other people say, hey, this is too quiet. So I need y'all's help to help me figure out whether or not the sound's good, because to me it's very loud. So let me know, give me feedback, and help me to make this better for you guys so you can actually hear what I'm saying. So first, a quick recap of what we have covered on the gaming UX misconceptions is UX will distort the design intents and make the game easier. And the whole point of UX is precisely to help the developers accomplish their vision, and certainly not to distort the design intent. And if the UX practitioner is a good UX practitioner and know what they're doing, then they're not going to have any kind of agenda of their own. They're going to be completely for the gamer, so that the gamer can enjoy the experience. And distorting the design intent doesn't necessarily solve that problem of letting the gamer enjoy the game. So we work together with game developers to make sure that it is an enjoyable game, that it's a good game, that it's easy to use, and that the interface doesn't get in the way of enjoying the game. And that's what we want. And we'll be going over the pillars of gaming UX in a minute from her book. But that is misconception number 1. We are here to help. We come in peace. The misconception number 2 is that UX will restrict the creativity of the team. And again, this is a misconception. She mentions here in the book Pablo Picasso. He never went through a UX process with his art. That's one of the arguments that people make about that. But if you know Picasso, and if you study art history, which I did in college, went to the Art Institute, so of course I'm going to learn about art. There is a science to art as well. There is a science to that, and there is a science to making things look beautiful. It's the symmetry, the asymmetry, there is balance, and so you need to understand these things and know these things. The art of the science of perspective, creating a good perspective drawing for foreshortening. I forgot the word for a second, and all those things to give that sense of depth and perception in art is a science, and you can tell when things are off. But a good artist knows when they can break the rules, and Picasso knew when he could break the rules because he knew the rules inside and out. So it's the same thing for UX. He had constraints that he had to work in, and that opened up his creativity to create some really awesome things. And it's the same with UX. We're not here to stifle creativity. Constraints enable greater creativity. And the enemy of art is, this is Orson Welles, who's the famous filmmaker, said, this is a quote, "The enemy of art is the absence of limitations. UX practitioners won't hamper the team's creativity. They will simply reveal more constraints that artists have to take into account. For example, human mind limitations. And let those additional limitations stimulate your creativity even more. Greater creativity and greater innovation comes through those constraints. And the world would be pretty boring without constraints." And Kim Libreri from Epic Games, she's Chief Technology Officer at Epic Games, has a little essay in the book. I highly recommend the book. UX analysis gives us the tools to have an unbiased scientific view of how our consumers are reacting to our product, and it has proven to be a reliable and mostly frictionless mechanism for fine-tuning content. Now, this does have to do with how we work together, and I'm actually doing a talk next week. I won't be doing this stream next week. I'll be doing a talk next week with Circuit Stream. I'm an instructor at Circuit Stream, teaching UX there, and we'll be doing a talk next week on UX designers and XR developers working together as a team. How does that work? How does that happen? And we'll be talking about processes. We'll be talking about the value of UX, which is another one of the common misconceptions. This one we're going over today is that there's not enough time or money to consider UX. I'll actually be talking about that next week in the Circuit Stream talk that I'm doing. So if you get a chance, check that out. I don't have a link to it, but if you go to circuitstream.com, I don't know if the info's up yet. I don't think it's up yet, but we will be doing a talk next week about that. And then misconception number 3 is UX is yet another opinion. And that's because what they're saying is that developers are getting opinions thrown at them from everywhere, and this is true in game development. You've got bosses, you've got coworkers, you've got players all throwing opinions. And opinions are different from making sure that it's a great user experience. But you've got all kinds of people throwing opinions out. And what we're wanting is unbiased feedback. So if it's presented correctly, UX feedback is the least biased of all the feedback originating from the various channels, while also being the most neutral. As long as UX practitioners know where they stand and have a clear understanding of the design and business goals, they should be the ones providing the most objective feedback. And I want to clarify about the user opinions, the gamer opinions. Now, there is a difference in usability. People have all kinds of opinions, even the gamers. And what you want to do is you want to get past the opinions to the meat of the research. There's a way of doing that to get past these biased opinions. Individual opinions don't make as much of a difference as the whole. And I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this in a way that makes sense. For example, visual design. A lot of people, including the users, the gamers, will say, there's all that white space there. There's plenty of room for more stuff. But as a designer, you know that that's not necessarily a good thing to fill in all the white space. That actually makes it harder to understand. It makes it harder to comprehend. So that's what I mean by users giving their own opinions. That's not necessarily, their opinion isn't necessarily what they really need. And so we need to be careful when we're taking feedback from our users. And that's why UX is so important in that process, is to get past that and help discern what should and shouldn't be done, what would be a good idea, what would not be a good idea. So there's a difference in getting opinions from your players and studying their behaviors to see what they really need. That's what I was trying to get at. I was just not saying it very well. And then misconception number 4 was UX is just common sense. And actually, this is not the case at all. It is a science, and most UX recommendations are not common sense at all. A lot of stuff is 20/20 hindsight after the game's already been put out. We'll say, oh, well, why did you miss that? That's just common sense. Actually, there's a lot more to it than that. And if you're not on the project, you're not working on the project, because we're so busy, there are things that can be missed, and that's where UX can help with that. They can help with the usability testing, that if the usability testing had happened early and often, that would have been caught sooner, before the game was released. 20/20 hindsight is a very common thing, but that in reality is not in the moment the case. And so UX methodologies should also help you find where the problems come from so that you can solve the correct problem. As Don Norman pointed out in 2013, problems usually don't reveal themselves in neat packages. They have to be discovered. So now today we're going to go over the last misconception that she has written about in this book, which is number 5. There's not enough time or money to consider UX. And making games is hard. And very often, developers don't have enough resources, whether it's time, money, or people, to ship the game that they want to ship on their deadline. They either have to work overtime and end up cutting a lot of features, and/or they have to sacrifice the game quality. In a 2015 press release, the International Game Developers Association revealed that 62% of game developers work overtime, and that nearly half of these professionals crunching are working more than 60 hours per week. On top of this, developing and marketing games is very expensive. This is why adopting a new process and hiring new people can be perceived as adding more complications. And however, investing in a UX process is exactly that, an investment. Shipping a game with critical UX issues could end up being extremely damaging to your game, especially given that your audience can choose to spend their time and money on many other games that are now on the market competing with your game. Sometimes even a small usability issue affecting players' shopping flow when they're interacting with the game store interface can have a dramatic impact on your revenue. Most studios utilize thorough quality assurance testing so that the most critical bugs can be fixed before their games are launched. And similarly, considering the user experience that your game offers will help you identify and fix the most critical issues that could impact your players and in turn impact the success of your game. Moreover, if you plan for a UX process within your iteration pipeline early in the development cycle, and I talk about this often, it will help you identify issues as soon as you have paper or interactive prototypes, allowing you to fix these issues in a significantly cheaper and quicker manner than when the features are already implemented in the game engine. As for the features implemented, it will also be cheaper for you to change elements in the game before they are fully arted up and polished. Of course, not everything can be tested via prototypes, and some game systems can only be tested efficiently in a closed beta stage. But the more issues you can take down early on, the more time you'll have to focus on systemic and game balancing issues later in the development cycle. Don't ask yourself if you can afford to consider UX. Ask yourself if you can afford not to. And that is very, very, very true. And I do talk about that in the article on my website called Calculating the Value of UX for XR. And I will put the link in the show notes and in the chat if I can get the chat open. See if it worked for me. If you visit my website, the link is on the Twitch About section, and it is also here in the chat. This is you can check out the article. It's under UX Playbook, Calculating the Value of UX for XR. And in here I talk about, I don't reinvent the wheel by rewriting the whole story, because there's this great video by Susan Weinschenk, and sorry if I mispronounced her name, that talks about the value of UX, and that this study that IEEE did, and the too long didn't read recap version of that is that the 3 of the top 12 reasons that projects fail are directly related to UX. Badly defined requirements, stakeholder politics, poor communication among customers, developers, and users, and UX methods can help with that. User research, stakeholder interviews, usability testing, and the entire UX design process being put in there from the beginning will help all of these issues. And the numbers on that are pretty staggering, is that UX designer can reduce the amount of time developers have to spend on avoidable rework is up to 50% if you have a UX designer on your team who knows what they're doing. And it can also reduce development time overall by between 33 and 50%. And that is by helping you improve your decision making and doing that upfront paper prototyping testing or digital prototyping testing before you start coding, before you start putting all that effort on artwork and environmental design into it. You can do early testing, and there's a process to that and a method to that UX designers can help with. And that's one of the reasons that we play these games is to learn from them, to learn what did they do well, what didn't go so well, how can we learn from that and make it better in our own games. And the ROI of that, the return on investment of that, is that every dollar invested in UX brings in $100 return on investment in time, in saving on time of development, rework later, and also the issues that come out that can affect whether or not your game sells and stays engageable later. And we'll talk about the pillars of UX in a moment. But I am doing a talk next week on Circuit Stream. I don't think it's out yet. I don't think the info's out yet. Nope, the info's not out yet, I don't think. So, yeah, because they're doing this one. So it will be out soon, but I will be doing a talk next Thursday at 12. I think it's at 12 Pacific time. I'm not sure. I need to double check, but the info will be out soon. I will be posting it on LinkedIn for sure. So make sure you're following me on LinkedIn if you're not already. And you'll get that info for next week, where I talk about how UX designers and XR developers work together, the value of XR, that whole process of what it looks like when you implement UX from the beginning of the process. What does that look like, and advice for working together with developers, because there can often be, if there can be some tension between UX developers and UX designers, and I'm going to give some advice on how to work through that, because I'm coming from experience, because I spent many years with headbutting with developers, and I finally learned there's a better way to do it, and I'm sharing that with you guys next week. Instead of this stream, I will be doing that, and then we'll be picking up again the next week. I might be testing different times of the day. I'm probably going to test a little bit later for a few weeks to see if that's better for people, to see if people can come live if it's a little bit later. But I also have to balance my own life and schedule, so we'll see. And I'll give it a test and go and see how it does, and if not, we'll be back to this normal time after that. But pay attention to that, stay tuned for that. And again, next week is a workshop with Circuit Stream instead of this normal stream. And then this is our last platformer that we're a 2D platformer that we're going to be playing in this little series that I'm doing on platformers. And this is a retro game that we're going to be playing today, retro style game that we're going to be playing today, because we don't want to forget the retro games. They started everything. So we'll be looking at that. And then when we get back from that little week jump from me not doing the stream next week, we'll get into VR, and I'll be doing some VR platformers at that point. So look forward to that.